Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. I have an absolute pleasure of a guest on today, the master of the subconscious mind, the Jedi of the subconscious mind. And guys, this is actually a mentor of mine. I actually did my qualifications through NLP and training in other areas with this incredible teacher. So I'm really grateful that he's jumped on today. But today I'm talking with Luke Pearce, teaches and certifies people in self-mastery techniques so they can transform their lives, get paid, and live life on their terms. And honestly, that introduction does not do this man justice, but hopefully his content and substance will give you a good idea of what this man does for himself, what he does for every client that is touched and the clients that his clients touch. And that's something I really admire in you, man, because the people that you impact, and me being one of them, being able to then share our gifts to more people, it's just that ripple effect. But I'm getting into it already. But Luke, thank you for joining me, my man.
Mate, thank you very much. What an intro, hey?
Mate, I don't think it did you justice, to be honest, but I know we've got a lot of substance to cover today, so
Yeah.
I know we'll get into it, man. I would love to. Most of my podcasts, I start off by hearing my guest story, and I don't know your story very well. You would have told me, I guess, when we would have started. We worked together 3 or 4 years ago. How long ago did we work together?
Yeah, I think it was about 3 years ago, right? But I mean, nowadays, 1 year goes honestly
Yeah,
so quick, right? Just
and
absolutely disappears.
and COVID's like a blur. I can't
Yeah.
remember what happened through
That's
there,
a,
so
ti-
it's been a
that's a that's a time warp in itself. So yeah, I think it was about 3 years ago we did practitioner training. Yep.
yeah. Man, please take me through your story. So share, I guess, how you've got into what it is that you do. I remember your story, actually. I do remember frames of it starting to come back to me because you shared some photos through the teachings of how you used to be a bit of a drinker. Worked at a butcher, is that right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Done my apprenticeship as a butcher, and yeah. So look, I'll take you through it, right? And there's many different aspects of it. As with anyone, there's always those moments in time, moments in your life that really make all the difference, right? So if we sort of backtrack, um, I think the first thing that's really important to understand is that I truly believe that people are very, very intelligent. All they need is a little bit of guidance and a little bit of encouragement. And that's the very thing that happened to me. When I was growing up, I was never a silly or stupid kid or anything like that. My upbringing was absolutely amazing. I had three older sisters, and mum and dad, they just did what mums and dads did, just super chilled, super, normal Aussie family, right? But the crazy thing is my perception back then was I didn't belong. And not only that, but like I wasn't welcomed. Growing up with four females in the house and dad always being at work, when you're sort of left to your own devices as a kid and you don't really know what's going on, you start to make up all sorts of different stories. And these stories that we make up, we tend to buy into. Now, for me personally, like I said, I started to buy into, well, I'm not welcome here. I'm not a part of the family. I'm an outcast, all these sorts of things. And it couldn't be further from the truth, right? But I started to actualize that story. And by the time I got to, the end of school, grades 6 and 7, and then the start of high school, I started to hang around some people that weren't necessarily doing the greatest things. All right, smoking, drinking, fighting, even stealing to a certain degree, but just people that were generally they were lost, right? And guess what? I was lost as well, so it was a match made in heaven. Now, if you could imagine 2 or 3 years of hanging around people that were lost, doing things that probably weren't that good for you, then you would probably suspect that you'd pick up some of those habits, beliefs, traits, behaviors, all these sorts of things. And that's exactly what I did, except there was one thing that set myself apart from everyone else. Everyone else would do things about 50%. I would do things about 200%, right? So if we were going to smoke, right, like cigarettes, everyone else would have like 2 or 3 a day. This is like year 8, 9, and 10. And now we're now we're two young children, Frankie being 6 and Rocky being nearly 4. I think, man, could you imagine like a 12 or 13-year-old smoker now? Like you'd want to pull them aside and be like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like I said, everyone else was having 2 or 3 a day, and I was having like 15, 20 a day. I was trying to get as many as I could into me. That turned into drinking. That turned into pretty much everything else, right? And there comes a point in time where you do something that is not good enough, for you, or not good for you. In a short amount of time, that begins to really burn some bridges. You know what I mean? And it got to the point where I was like broke on every single level. You know, by the time I was 18, I was broke on every single level, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially. Like my career, I was working as a butcher and I didn't want to do that. Although I love the work, I just knew that that's not really where I was meant to be. And by this stage of life, 18 years old, my mother and father moved away to the Gold Coast and we were living in Harvey Bay. So it was about a 4-hour drive. And that was the first moment of my so-called adult life, being 18. No idea what day it was realistically. But that was the first moment in my life where I actually had to make my own decisions and I had to own the consequences of those decisions. Now, a few things started to happen where the consequences were actually quite serious. Like it affected my work. It affected my relationship with the girlfriend that I had at the time. She ended up leaving me. And I was like, what the hell? Like, why are you leaving me at that age? I thought I was the man. I'm like, why are you leaving me? She's like, Luke, I'm not going to stand by someone that I love and watch them literally bury themselves into the ground. And I was like, oh, you're this and you're that. And I sort of just left. I didn't think much of it. Anyway, that night I got, full of grog, right? As you do to drown the sorrows. And I was sitting there in the garage of my sister's house. That's where I was living at the time, between places in a bloody garage. And I was sitting there all alone, blind, rotten drunk. And I thought to myself, is this what it's come to? You're 18 years old. You got no friends. And even the friends that you are hanging around, they're doing a whole bunch of dumb shit that you don't want to be doing. Like, is this what it's going to be like? And I was like, that's bullshit. This is not what it's going to be like, right? That next morning I wake up and I had that hangover that could have killed an elephant, right? And I remember walking into the little bathroom that I had and I actually saw myself in the mirror. Now, I said it a moment ago that that was the first time in my life where I actually had to make my own decisions. Well, fast forward to the next day, this was the first time that I actually saw who I was. Or who I was being, not necessarily who I was. Because I knew deep down inside, I was so much more than what I was portraying, right? But obviously I saw who I was being and that fucking shocked me. That really opened up my eyes because I realized that if I keep doing what I'm doing, it's not going to last very long. I'm going to kill myself. Someone else is going to get injured. I'm going to end up in lockup, just something really bad. I just had this gut feeling. And in that moment, I burst into tears and I was like, fuck, I don't know what to do. Like, what do I do? Like, tell me what to do. I was talking to bloody Buddha, Jesus, God, whoever wanted to listen.
Yeah, whoever's out there, listen to me.
I didn't care who it was, right? I was like, look, and this is exactly what I said, right? I said, you tell me what to do and I'll do it exactly. You tell me exactly what to do and I'll do it. And this little voice popped in my head, right? And it said, right, what I want you to do is I want you to look around in your life and look at this giant shit show that you've created. Now, all I want you to do is the exact opposite, and you'll get pretty close to what it is that you want. And I tell you what, in that moment, I call it like the tap on the shoulder, right? In that moment, I got the tap on the shoulder, and it was like I actually woke up. And not only did I wake up, but when I did, I was like, holy fuck, what am I doing? I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And I started to sit down and I started to think about all the things that I didn't want to do. Right, I don't like my job. I don't like my health and fitness. I don't like my friends. I don't like where I live. And I wrote down a list, probably 6 or 7 things on it. And that day, not a week later, not a month later, but that day, I put change into action. I went into my job, working as a butcher, and I said, hey, Gary, to my boss, I'm like, look, man, I can't do this anymore. I quit. And he thought that I was sort of just, full of shit or hungover or whatever it was. And then I burst into tears. I was like, mate, I am fucking so serious. I'm like, I'm not playing. This is not a game. Like, I am done. I can't do this anymore. And he's like, mate, you do whatever it is that you need to do. And Gary's known me for a very long time. Like I said, my dad was a butcher. My grandfather was a butcher. Harvey Bay's a small town. And, I always remember him saying, he's like, Pearce, he used to call me Pearce. He's like, Pearce, I've known from when you were, in, what did he say? Like under 10s rugby league. I always knew that you're a good young fella. He's like, don't go out and show me. He's like, go out and prove it to yourself. He said, because you are. You know what I mean? And I tell you what, as a young fella in that sort of environment, I think that was the first time that I actually accepted encouragement. And I was like, holy fuck, you're actually quite true. Like, that's actually really true. You're actually really right. Like, I am a good bloke. I've never done anything dumb. Well, I mean, I've done a lot of dumb things, but that doesn't mean that I am that.
Yeah.
And, you know, ever since then, things begin to change. Like I said, I quit my job. I left where I was living. So I moved from Harvey Bay to the Gold Coast, probably about a 4 hour drive, all these sorts of things. And on the way, I shit you not, right? Looking back, it's like, how could this even happen? But on the way to the Gold Coast, I remember listening to a CD. I think it was a CD, or maybe it was on like audio books, but it was Tony Robbins' Unleash the Power Within.
How good.
And that blew my mind, not only because of just, you know, Tony Robbins and what he talks about, but it blew my mind that someone dedicated their life to learning these things and teaching these things where other people could drive along and literally do it within the car. And that was a monumental moment within my life. I was like, holy shit, change is possible. And not only is change possible, but you can learn. There's people out there that, you know, you can go and buy their audiobook or their CD or their you know, their book for $10. And realistically, if you actually read it and you actually put shit into practice, you can significantly change the way that you think, feel, and act. And that was massive. You know, that I still look back on that moment. I was like, holy shit, that was actually the moment where many, many pennies dropped. I remember saying to myself, I'm like, hey man, like this can actually happen. I've just made more change in 24 hours than what I've done in probably the last, you know, 4 years of my life. Powerful. And then I started to get like addicted. I'm like, fuck, what else? And you know, you start to tick off, right? So that was one of the big moments that sort of put me onto the self-development, the you know, self-help, learning about yourself side of things. And from there, like, she's been a wild ride. That was, you know, down near 15 years ago now, right?
Crazy shit, man. And there's a lot of points I already got in there. I'd love to keep going and get up to what you are now. So you've got into the Tony Robbins. You've had those moments in times. You've had the tap on the shoulder from the universe. And I always paraphrase this. Maybe you know this quote better than I do, but it's like sometimes the universe will give you a breath of fresh air. Sometimes it'll be getting hit by a rock. Sometimes it's getting hit by a bus, and it's trying to wake you up to the callings or the whatever, like you said, whatever intelligence is out there, God, the universe, whoever, the Buddha, whoever's listening to you, like it's actually, it's always there. It's always trying to give you those signs, but are you conscious to them is the question, right? So it's pretty powerful that you were able to become conscious even in those sort of lower parts of your life.
Yeah. And this is the thing, right? It's like, yeah, exactly. Like first you get the pebble. The pebble's like, hey, maybe we should change a few things in our lives. And then if you don't listen to that, you get the rock, right? If you don't listen to the rock, you get the boulder. If you don't listen to the boulder, you get the brick wall.
Yeah.
Now this just is the path. And I see it every single day. And I'm telling people, I'm like, hey, this is the boulder phase. Don't wait until you get to the brick wall phase. Although sometimes when you hit the brick wall, you learn some of the most powerful, you know, lessons of your life. It sucks, you know, because it's painful, right? Like it's hard, but sometimes you need to hit the brick wall in order to really get it. And once you've got it, no one can take it away from you. That's the kicker.
And bring us up to speed now. So you've, I guess, got into the self-development journey. I was actually reliving my journey as you were saying that. I remember my first Tony Robbins video I watched. It was on YouTube. It was like matching and mirroring. It was like rapport, like proximity, and I was like, holy shit, what the fuck? This is amazing. And for someone who struggled with communication and connecting with people, I'm like, this is genius. Like, I'm so smart. And then I went down the rabbit holes, watching every YouTube video I could find. And like you said, it's like you can pay $10 for a book. YouTube, like you're listening to a podcast right now, guys, which is absolutely free. Like the resources are out there if you make the choice to go after them. So you get into the self-help journey. What are some of those next steps that led you to what you do now? And I'd love for you to explain what it is that you do now.
Yeah, definitely. Right. So we'll keep on walking down the path, so to speak. So obviously left Harvey Bay, drove to the Gold Coast. Mum was like, what the hell are you doing here? I told her what happened. And she's like, oh my God, you know, I'm so happy because I knew that there was only two things that were going to happen. You're either going to stay there, wasn't going to end that great, or you're going to move and you're going to go on to whatever it is that you go on to. Now, obviously I was still a butcher. So I came to the Gold Coast and I thought, well, I'm not just going to sit around for the next, you know, God knows how long. I got to do something. So I'll go and finish off my apprenticeship. I love butchering, right? It's something, it's an art. It literally is an art, right? So I love doing it. And I went and finished off my apprenticeship, and that probably took me maybe like a year and a half. So in this time, I was still drinking, still smoking, but I was trying to sort my life out as I went. But as I went through it all, I was still reading and learning, but I wasn't actually putting anything into place, right? Now, we get to the stage where my mom, my dad, and myself, we actually bought a butcher shop here on the Gold Coast.
Awesome.
And we worked in that for, I don't know, maybe like 3 years, something like that. And we had some of the greatest moments of our life within that butcher shop, right? As you could probably imagine and understand, working with your family and living with your family, by the way, is an absolute recipe for fireworks, okay? And it gets to the point where the butcher shop's not really doing that good. I was so-called super new school. Dad was super old school. And I'm saying, Dad, the shit we're doing is not working. It was 30 years ago. Times have changed. People want this and we've got to do this and all this sort of stuff. So there was a massive conflict there. Yeah. And being young and naive and probably very stubborn, I walked in one day and I said to my mum, today's the day. Either he goes or I go. You've got until, I said, you got until 12 o'clock to make that decision. Now, what a great son to put your mum in that position, right? Choose between the person that you love and married or your only son. Let me know by 12 o'clock. And anyway, long story short, she had to talk to Dad, and Dad being a lot more mature and a lot more wise than, you know, I was back then, he decided to check out. He's like, I'm going to leave. Obviously, you know, something's got to change. So I will go and you can have the reins and see what happens. I mean, by the time I got to it, it was in the shit, right? You could have got 100 fellas in there, 100 people in there, and you probably still wouldn't have done that great. So we got to the point where we just closed the doors. You know, we all had a family meeting one day, and I said, look, we're working 60 to 70 hours a week. I've got no life whatsoever. There's no cash in the bank to show for it. Maybe if you're earning bloody, you know, 50 grand a week profit, maybe you could understand it, but no, just nothing was working out. And Dad said, hey, you know what the best thing that we could do? We got to shut this thing down and we all need to go our separate ways. Mum and Dad broke up. I mean, Dad and myself, we didn't talk to each other for a long time. It's just a big old shit show, right? Now, within this transition, the number one thing that really made us all wake up to ourselves was, in order to get us out of the shit from, you know, essentially going bankrupt within the butcher shop, we actually sold my grandfather's farm. My grandfather is no longer, he's no longer here. He passed away years and years ago. But I mean, he went to World War II, survived that. I mean, that's a feat just in itself. Yeah. Came back and he bought a dairy farm. That's, you know, that's what he did his whole entire life. And, you know, we sold the farm to get ourselves out of the shit, so to speak. And then it was really weird within the Pearce family because everyone sort of just, we didn't talk about it. Everyone was just, I don't know, maybe a bit ashamed. And I get it, man. I had so much guilt. I lived with guilt for years and years over that because I thought it was all my fault, which, you know, is not true, right? There's many people in that process. But not only that, what if I was never meant to be there to start with? You know, this is a big thing that a lot of people do, and I see all the time. They get fixated on something, and they may have worked a long time in order to get there, but then it doesn't work out the way they want it to work out. It's like, maybe you're not meant to be there. And they say, Luke, I've fucking dedicated the last 5 years, the last 10 years, the last 20 years of my life to this thing, or even to this person. It's got to work out. I'm like, you can only influence that so much. So, you know, within that, I knew that that's not where I was meant to be. I was really fixated at that time on my health and fitness because before that I was an absolute mess. So I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking, I started cleaning up my diet, and all of a sudden I actually walked into a gym. First gym that I've walked into in years and years and years. And I got a personal trainer and I started doing about 3 sessions a week. And once again, I got addicted with learning about the body. Because I've already been diving into all the mindset stuff. And the weirdest thing happened. I started to apply all the things that I've been learning about for the last 3 years. And I had rapid change, rapid growth, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And it was like that sweet spot of life where everything just made sense. I was like, holy shit, I want to do what my personal trainer is doing for me. I want to encourage people to do the things that they want to do. Because I truly believe, I fucking know for myself, I'm worthy of, you know, doing something that I truly want. I'm worthy of spending my time, love, and energy the way that I wish. I was like, man, I want that for other people. So obviously I went and did my personal training course. I became a personal trainer. I worked in, you know, PT for 4 or 5 years, whatever it might be. And within 6 weeks of being on the gym floor, I'm like, this has got very little to do with the human body. Now, obviously, the human body's a
Interesting.
big part of it,
Yeah.
but I got fascinated on the mindset. I'm like, why is someone coming in and they're training 5 or 6 days a week, but they look miserable? And when I talk to them, everything in their life is up to shit. And then I talk to someone else who comes in twice a week and they look fulfilled. Like they look happy. They look actually filled with life. And that got my curiosity. I was like, what do you do? Like, what do you do differently than this guy? Because this guy or this gal, they look super ripped up and fit and healthy and all these sorts of things. You look like you're sort of just living life, but you've got something that they don't. Like, what the fuck is that thing? And, you know, that's when I figured out, it's like, it's actually like a fulfillment. You're filled with what it is that you're seeking. You're not empty. There's no piece of the puzzle missing. And I'm like, I want that. Like, how do I get that? And obviously that's when I started going and looking at NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy, any type of change that would get you some sort of result or closer to that fulfillment or contentment, happiness, whatever it is that it was.
Man, what a story. What a fucking story, man. Thank you for sharing. And just, I like those little chapters you got through there. Like, obviously, the younger period where you probably wanted a great space, then made the change, got into a bit of self development. I love that you just kept doing the self development behind the scenes while you're doing the butcher experience with the family. Then you're into the fitness industry and you're still learning and you're just, everything's starting to click into place for you. Man, there's a lot of words that I'd love to go into. I've never done it with a guest like this, but I think you're one of the few people that can handle this. I'm going to throw a word at you, and I'd love you to just expand on what that word means to you. Okay, I've never done this before. We're going to give it a
let's
shot.
do it.
So when I say the word change, what comes to mind for you?
I think it's discovering what's not working and then working towards what it is that you want to experience within your life.
And why do most people don't change? And the reason, and before you answer that question, because I've got very similar beliefs to you. I think that's why we align so well. Is like, it's like the answers are out there, right? Like you can,
of course,
you could Google majority of the challenges you've got, and you'll have thousands of options to do it. How come so many people don't do it? How come people don't make the change? And whether we go into like the PT world, I was in the fitness industry for 7 years as well. It's like they might be doing some things, but they're not addressing the handbrake that's causing them not to change. So I guess to summarize that all back up, why the majority of people don't change? And then what can those people do to start to make change?
Look, I mean, the actual answer is there's 50 million different reasons why people don't do the things that they want to do, why they don't change. Fear is going to be a big one. Being uncomfortable is going to be another big one. Stepping into the uncertainty is going to be another huge one, right? And I get it. Holy fucking hell, do I get it. More so than ever before. Because when you decide, oh my God, something is not really going the way that I want it to go within my life, you've got to take responsibility for that. That means if you're taking responsibility, that's the opposite of blaming others. And blaming others is a very easy way to say, hey, well, that's not me. That's not me. I didn't do that. My mom or dad did that. My fucking boss did that. My this, and this. And sometimes that's a very soothing experience, but yet it gets you nowhere. You know what I mean? So when you actually say, well, hang on a second, there's things happening within my life that I don't really like. Step number one, I got to be aware of it. Step number two, I got to own it. I probably fucked up somewhere along the line. I've probably not known how to do certain things, and I obviously haven't taken action. Therefore, I'm left with the consequences or the result that I have right now. Okay, that's fine. I'll own that. But I'm also going to own that I don't want that. So what do we do now? Well, obviously, you got to start looking at, okay, well, what do we do to change? Now, this is probably more important to the question. Sometimes people get themselves into such a complex situation that it's not just about them. Maybe they've got husbands, wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, bosses, friends, family. And if the opinions of those people are stronger than whatever it is within inside the people, the opinions will win 10 times out of 10. And you might go out and you might try and change as much as you want, but it's going to be rough and it's going to be hard because you're going to be fighting both sides of the battle. It's like driving your car with the handbrake on. It's going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
So, you know, does that answer the question at all?
It does. And then, so say someone's in that position, like I like to, when we do these podcasts, I like to sort of put in the shoes of someone who might be listening to this. So say someone is listening to this and they've got a partner that they don't want to be with, and it's super complex. There's kids, there's a mortgage,
Yes.
there's history there. How can one, whether the answer is chunking or whatever it is for you, how does someone take all those complex factors? Because you're right, it could be the house. I've got thoughts of clients I've worked with. They'll have like, they'll find a reason not to. They'll find the problem to the solution. They'll find instead of looking what it's half glass empty, half glass full. Like there are always reasons not to, but there's always ways to do it still. So how does someone who might have more complexity that's stopping them from making that change, how can they maybe break it down, simplify it one at a time? How can they work through that?
Yeah. So the first thing that pops in my mind, I've been saying this for a while, right? It's like change is scary. That's a given. It's an absolute given, right? Change is just going to be scary at sometimes, but not changing can be fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like that's the actual thing that really got me to move and get off my backside. Cause I was like, hang on a second, this change is scary. That means I'm going to have to leave my work. I'm going to have to leave my house. I'm going to have to leave my friends, even though my friends, we're not really friends, right? Yeah. I had to do all these sorts of things. I'm like, that's really scary. But I said, well, staying here and going down this path in a few months' time, in a few years' time, maybe in a few decades' time, like that's terrifying. So there was a massive amount of pain to that. And I just realized, hang on a second, if I don't change now, it's going to equal the most amount of pain I've ever experienced. So then once you get, past that stage, you say, okay, well, what's next? There's a lot of moving parts. You just got to start somewhere. I wouldn't suggest to people that, if you're not necessarily happy, don't try and change 50 million different things at once, because it's going to be very challenging. You may want to understand that you only need a little bit of change to experience a lot. I think that's a fundamental thing that, some people, including myself in the past, I was thinking I have to change everything. I'm like, no, you're working from the bottom up, work from the top down. Change your mindset, change your perception, and everything else will change by default.
How does someone change their perception?
Well, this is the $1,000,000 question, right? This is the thing that everyone's seeking. This is why people are learning about the unconscious mind, NLP, self-mastery techniques, whatever it is. But essentially learning about your unconscious mind and realizing that it works in pictures, sounds, and feelings. If you can just figure out and comprehend those three things, your unconscious mind is working in pictures, sounds, and feelings, you can begin to really make some serious change within your life. Now, in saying that, I would strongly advise that you get, what's the word? Not necessarily coaching, but get educated on it. Because you can learn about a whole bunch of different things, but if they don't work for you, or if you don't know how to use them, those things are pretty much useless.
Yeah, 100%. Man, next word, heal or healing.
Oh, shit. Okay.
To future pace you a little bit, I would love to tie this into your mum's story.
Yeah. Healing. The first thing that comes to mind is come to peace. Come to peace within. If you want to heal, this is my opinion, right? You guys,
that's a great answer. I like that.
You do whatever it is that you want to do. But if you want to heal something, you better come to peace within first. And, I've been down that road with my mom. I've been down that road with my wife, April. I've been down that road with myself, with many other different people. And, it's never really led me astray. It's always been pretty solid, that belief.
One question now before we keep going is, why do so many people have that resistance to letting go and coming to peace? I love that answer, by the way. There's another quote, I'll share it soon, that there was a one-liner you gave me when I worked with you, and I use it all the time. I'll let you know in a sec. But answer that. Why do so many people struggle to come to peace? They can't let go of the judgment of dad, of mum, of ex-partner, ex-business partner, teacher, bully, whatever it is.
Yeah, look, the rough sort of answer is it's probably a part of their identity. It's probably a part of who they are. So when they release, or if they did let go of it, they might think that they're letting go of part of themselves. And if you think about it in the big picture, why would you ever want to let go of yourself? Why would you want to ever let go of the thing that really is most important to you? Like it doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah. The line that comes to mind is Tony Robbins says, you'll always stay the strongest force in the human personality is to stay consistent with how we define ourselves. So if you've got that identity of I am this way
Yeah.
because of this person, it might be hard to actually let go of that thing.
Exactly right. So the grief, this is, I mean, if people can get this, holy shit, it's an absolute game changer. The grief of your past self, the past versions of yourself is one of the most powerful things that you can come to peace with. Because if you can't grieve, if you can't pass the baton on to the new version of yourself, you're never going to evolve that character. There's always going to be the past being recreated in the now.
You are. I like your analogy is passing the baton on to the next version of yourself. I like that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
how
how,
does what some maybe some tools or questions someone can ask themselves to pass that baton on or to
well,
let
this
go?
is, yeah, and look, great question, right? This is a big thing that I've done not only with myself but many other people, is just the acceptance of that past part, that past version of yourself. So if I look back to when I was, 16 to 22, absolute piss wreck, right? Like just drunk 24/7. I used to have to start work as a butcher at 5:30 in the morning. I'd have a couple of cans before I went to work.
Shit.
So
Okay.
I'm like, dude, what the fuck? But that version of myself from 16 to 22 was probably the hardest, maybe the hardest working, or no, I'm going to take that back. The most courageous. That was the most courageous version of myself to date, because I'm like, look at the uncertainty that you went through in order to get us to where we are now. So I've got to accept that. I got to take the good and the bad. I can't be ashamed. And I was ashamed, right, for years and years of that version of myself. And then I realized, hang on a second, the thing that I'm ashamed of, the thing that I'm rejecting has got the very thing that I want, courage to keep moving forward. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, it's massive.
You're a great teacher. That's why I like listening to you.
Oh, thank you.
Man, disease. Next word.
Oh, shit. Out of balance. It's the
Uh,
first thing that pops into mind.
elaborate on that.
Well, dis-ease is, the opposite of ease and flow within the body. So if you are feeling negative, if you've got negative emotions, or if you've got self-doubt, anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, shame, humiliation, the 50 million different things that you could have, by definition, that's the opposite of flow and ease. So the opposite of flow and ease must be dis-ease.
Yeah.
And then that starts to manifest within the body, within the physical body, spiritual body, mental body, whatever it is. And all of a sudden we have certain things happening to our bodies that we can't really explain. And it's like, well,
can you use that tangent to flow into the story that you've shared with me about your mum, and then tie into that book? Because that's I think it's a really powerful story, because it's it's just when I first heard it from yourself and hear it from Louise Hay and obviously other teachers that teach this, Wayne Dyer comes to mind, where your thoughts are creating the disease, and then you go fix it with a tablet that a pharmaceutical company's just made to make a bit of money. It's just, that's a bad cycle to get into. So I'd love for you to share that story, maybe give some perspective to people and just other ways to look at disease and healing and I guess looking after yourself.
Yeah, definitely, right? Like I'm saying, I truly believe that within my, perception of the world, in my world anyway, that disease is caused by, an unbalance somewhere within the body. It could be physically, it could be by the food that you're eating, could be by the chemicals, people jamming 100 coffees down their guts every day, whatever the thing is, right? Drinking, smoking, drugs, all the things. But that's the physical body. Then we've got the mental body. What about what it is that we consume? You know that old saying, like, you are what you eat?
Yep.
Well, it's like, realistically, it's like you are what you consume. And I would buy into that a lot more.
Yep.
Because a lot of people are consuming their thoughts that are, not only negative, but they're destructive. And it's all happening at an unconscious level. So they're driving along in their car. They might have a smile on their face, talking to their friend or whatever it is. But these voices, these things, whatever it is within the unconscious mind, they're on play 24/7. And people can't realize it. And I get it, right? I was in the same boat. I'm like, what the fuck? Why don't they teach you this stuff at school? Why don't they give you a book when you're in bloody kindergarten on this stuff? It's like, well, that's another story for another day. But realistically, when you have imbalance, physical, mental, or even spiritual, there's going to be some kind of manifestation. And realistically, you're only going to get two manifestations, the thing that you want or the thing that you don't want. There's not too many in-betweens, right? And if we have anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt, negativity, you know, these events that happen to us from the past and all these sorts of things, that'll start to show itself in the body. Now, what's the reason for that? All I'm doing is giving my opinion, right? Well, first comes the brick, or first comes the pebble. And the pebble's like, hey, I think maybe we should change some things. Well, no one listens to the pebble. Who gives a shit? Bugger off, pebble. I got things to do. Then comes the brick, and the brick hurts a little bit more. And that knocks you around. Maybe this thing, whatever it is, starts to get a little bit worse, a little bit more noticeable. Well, if you don't listen to that, there's only 2 more steps. You get the boulder, and the boulder wipes you off your feet. But it doesn't knock you off your perch, but it wipes you off your feet. Then you hit the brick wall. Not many people come back from the brick wall, because the brick wall could be something like cancer. It could be something, you know, like a really heavy duty disease or some sort of thing that's really going to knock them around. Now, with my mother, oh my God, I mean, we could spend a day talking about this, right? And we'd still only have a little bit of the story. But a couple of years back, I was holding a retreat. This is like my first ever retreat, you know, with my Self-Mastery Techniques crew. And I was so excited, right? I was like, fuck yeah, it's going to be amazing. 3 days, spending time with the people that I love, teaching the things that I love, right? I was like, shit, it's ticked all the boxes. I get down there on the Friday, I set up this house, got all the food, got everything sorted, and I'm waiting for the, you know, waiting for the crew to rock up. The crew rocks up. 30 minutes later, I get a phone call. It's my sister. I'm like, fuck, what's my sister want, right? And my mum had been a bit weird. She lives on her own. She had a job in a daycare center. So she was sort of doing her own thing, but she was being weird, right? And when I say being weird, she'd ring people up at like 8:30 at night and just talk absolute gibberish. Now, I thought that she was on the drink, all right? Because maybe 6 months or a year before that, we had a little episode where, you know, there was a bit too much drinking going on. And, you know, we cleaned that up and everything was going really good. So I didn't think much of it. Well, I didn't think as hectic as it was anyway. I'm talking to my sister Casey, and she's like, oh my God, Luke, you got to get back to the Gold Coast right now and come to the emergency ward. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And she says, it's mum. She's, what do you call it when you're not with it? She's not unconscious, but she was like just out of it, right? Whatever that means.
Loopy.
Yeah, loopy, dazed, maybe delirious, delusional, all those things, right? And I thought, oh my fucking Lord. Okay, I'll be there in like half an hour. And on the way to that hospital, like I would go 5 minutes of crying my eyes out because I knew something was really significant wrong. I didn't know what, but I just knew there was something significant wrong. I went through 5 minutes of crying my eyes out, and then 1 minute of being like, no, it's okay. You know what you know. That's what I kept on saying to myself. You know what you know, and no matter what happens, the number one thing that I'm taking away from this is it's fucking important to live. Like, it's so important to actually live the way that you want to do it. Because maybe in a short amount of time, you get knocked off your perch, and you're always, you know, shoulda, woulda, coulda. I'm like, no, you got to do it now. You can't wait. That was my thing anyway, right? Long story short, I get to the bloody, you know, the fucking, what's it called? The emergency room. And I walk in there, and here's my mum sitting on the edge of the bed, you know, in the whole hospital gown and got the little blanket and all that sort of stuff, drinking a coffee. And she just looked at me. She's like, oh, hello, my son. What are you doing here? And I was like, are you fucking serious? What am I doing here? I'm like, what are you doing here? Because no one else was in the room. And I didn't realize how out of it she was. It was the first time that I looked at my mother, and she didn't really know who I was. She knew my name, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just different. She didn't really know who I was. And I saw Casey. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I started to flip out by this stage, right? And she's like, look, come and talk to the doctor. Went and talked to the doctor, and he's like, oh, you know, Mr. Pearce, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, mate, what the fuck is going on? Don't give me all the bullshit. Just tell me straight to the point. And he said, oh, well, it appears that your mother has brain cancer. And not only does she have brain cancer, but she's got 17 lesions on and in her brain. And here's a photo of the scans. And I tell you what, I don't know if you've ever had those moments in life where it feels like your knees and your legs just disappear. You know, like I felt really weak. I didn't know if I was going to pass out. I didn't know if I was going to throw up. Like I was just sick into my stomach, right? And I thought, no, like what? No, what are you talking about? My mother doesn't have fucking brain cancer. And he was saying yes. And I'd advise that your sister, which lived over in Malaysia, she's a teacher over there. I'd advise that you tell her to come back immediately because she's probably got 2 or 3 days to go. And I'm like, are you fucking like, no, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm not accepting that answer at all. And this went on for hours and hours and hours and hours, right? And I sort of went back and I sat down with mum, and she's like, hey, like, what's going on? Like, didn't skip a beat. She's obviously delusional, right? But didn't skip a beat. And I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, do you think that you've got cancer? She's like, no, it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. She's like, oh, I don't feel that great, but I definitely don't have cancer, right? Anyway, like I said, this went on for a very long time. And that night, obviously I had to go home because I got 2 kids in April, and I stayed there as long as I could. I went home and I didn't cry myself to sleep, right? I fucking sobbed all night. And when I did get to sleep from exhaustion, I would wake myself up crying. It was really a messed up moment in my life, right? And for people that can relate to what I'm talking about, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, it's just fucking horrific. Now, in the morning, I woke up and, obviously my wife, April, bless her cotton socks, she's very switched on. And she could see that I was still crying. I was still fucking all over the shop. And she's like, hey, you know what the number one thing that you forgot? This is before I went to see mum in the morning. She's like, you know what the number one thing that you forgot? I'm like, what? What are you talking about? She's like, everything that you know. And in that moment, I was like, say that again. She's like, you've forgotten everything that you know and everything that you've learned over the last 10 years. And this chokes me up, right? Every time I think about this. She said, your mother is going to be your greatest student. Ooh. And in that moment, I was like, oh my fucking Lord. All I have to do is teach her what I know. Because this is an imbalance within the body. There's something going on within her that has obviously been going on for a very long time that she's suppressed or depressed, and it's trying to express itself in a certain way. Now, this is just my belief. This is my experience. No one can take that away. But there would be people out there that would be like, oh, well, fuck, I wouldn't do that. It's like, cool, you didn't have to do it. I'm just telling, my side of the experience. Now, that morning when I got there, I was so excited. I couldn't park the car quick enough, right? I pretty much threw the car into the car park, ran up, got in the lift, and I found mum. I'm like, Mum, how you going? She's like, I'm doing really good. I sat there for about, I don't know, an hour, maybe 2 hours waiting for the doctor to come in. And all we had was a napkin. We had like a fucking thing of napkins. We had like the hospital breakfast, banana bread, eggs, all this sort of stuff. And I just went to town. It's sort of like I left my body and I went to town. I'm like, right, Mum, I need you to know some fundamental things. This is the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind is in charge of all your experiences. It takes everything personally. And most importantly, it wants structure in your beliefs and who it is that you think you are. Now, this is the conscious mind. The conscious mind is there for choice. Do I want this thing? Do I want this thing? And in the middle of that is a fancy word called the critical faculty. I just called it the guard. The guard is the very thing that allows things in and allows things out. I'm like, do you understand what I'm saying? She's like, yeah. So then I'd point to the napkin. I'm like, what's this? And she'd be like, well, that's a conscious mind. I'm like, what's it do? She's like, choice. I said, good, what's this? Unconscious mind. What does that do? She's like, well, it runs every function of your body. And I said, exactly. If you want to heal yourself, what's the number one thing that you should be talking to? And she sort of looked at me a bit funny. She's like, unconscious mind. I'm like, ding, ding, ding. I said, now the next step is what's in your unconscious mind that's out of balance? What's in your unconscious mind that you are not yet, you haven't come to peace with yet? And we started going through all these different, events and situations and feelings and emotions. And I shit you not, within 20 to 30 minutes of that conversation, a new doctor walked in. I'd never seen him before, but he felt different. And I said, hey, mate, like, what's your name? And he said, fucking Reggie or whatever it was. He said, you want some good news or great news? I'm like, mate, you just give me whatever you got, right? At this point, I'm hanging on by my fingernails. He said, well, the great news is you're going to last a lot longer than 3 days. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. That diagnosis that you got yesterday, this is exactly what he said. He says, yeah, that's bullshit. And I'm thinking to myself, who the fuck is this dude, right? I said, so what is it? And he's like, well, we're still working that out. But from what I can discover, it's actually a fungal infection of the body. And that fungal comes from, here's the kicker, right? You couldn't write this shit if you tried. That fungal infection comes from a red spotted gum tree. Only comes from trees, and it's very, very common in koalas. Now look at your face, Louis. Could you imagine my face looking at that doctor? I'm like, hang on a second. Fuck? Yeah, I said, what the fuck? Go back to the start, say everything exactly the same, and let's try again. And he said exactly the same thing. And I looked at mum, and you know what she said to me? Told you it wasn't cancer. And
Your
I'm sitting there,
mum's a legend.
oh, mate, absolute legend, right? I mean, she was fucking off a rocket at that stage. But I'm looking around for the cameras. I'm like, where's the punk me moment? Like,
Yeah.
where's the gotcha moment, right? Because nothing made sense. But then I started to think about what it is that I know and what it is that I believe. And I'm like, that makes perfect sense. Look at all the work that we just did. Look at all the things that we talked about, things that my mum has never talked about to anyone. So those things got expressed. Therefore, when the things within inside you get expressed, the real time, the real reality, so to speak, I mean, in my opinion, has to change in real time.
Mm.
Now, don't get me wrong. This story, I mean, this went on for about probably 3 or 4 weeks. No, even longer. She ended up in intensive care unit. You know, she was up and down, up and down, up and down. But this is the one factor that I noticed most. Every time I was with her and every time we would talk about the things that we would talk about, she would miraculously get better.
Mm.
Now, when there was times where I had maybe work or trainings on or whatever the thing was that I couldn't get there, she would go downhill.
Yeah.
And you want to know the really fucking crazy thing? One of the crazy things? This was in intensive care unit, right? After she had surgery on her brain, all this sort of bloody really heavy duty shit. I said, Mum, I'm really curious. Is there any chance whatsoever that this situation is happening so you and I can actually hang out? And she gave me this fucking shit look. And you know, like, it's a shit look as in maybe.
Yeah.
I'm like, mother, you know, we can do this in different ways, right? She's like, well, you're always just so busy and, you know, everyone's got their life and all these sorts of things. And obviously mum and dad aren't together anymore. So she's like, I just sit at home and I go to my job and I hate my job. I don't want to do that. And all of a sudden the can of worms opened up. And every single thing that you could think about, I just kept saying, what else, what else, what else? And 3 days later, she got out of intensive care unit. And a week later, she got out of the hospital.
What a fucking story, man.
Oh, man. Like, it blows my mind even talking about it. I was like, fuck, that actually happened. Yeah, madness.
What to tie that into some, I guess, some tips or punchlines for people to get out of that in terms of maybe just question everything or I don't know, explore different modalities, explore particular books, maybe the book that I know we've spoken about, but where can someone, from hearing what it is that you've just said, because like you said, that's how you viewed the world, that's what you believe. I love that line April give you, like you've forgotten what you know, like you know what you know from the years and thousands of hours of books and podcasts and coaches and mentors and everything you've done. What can the average person listening to this right now, where they've got disease in themselves, they've got disease in family members, what can they do to start to look at those other options, not just the what the doctor's saying? It's the mind, it's the imbalances. Because I absolutely align with what you're saying. It's an imbalance. There's judgment, there's resentment, which is manifesting in XYZ. I absolutely agree with that. So what can someone do to start to actually apply that or even learn that stuff for themselves?
Well, this is the thing, right? The only thing that I was going to say is you've got to equip yourself with knowledge and information that works for you. So how do you do that? Obviously, you follow or you learn from or you go to people that are so-called preaching and teaching what it is, you know, that you're after. Because if you go down the Western realm, right? And don't get me wrong, before mum's whole thing, I was like, oh, Western medicine is bullshit. You know, they just want to kill you and all this sort of stuff. But I learned a very valuable lesson that balance is key, the yin and yang. There's two sides to every story. And I'm like, man, without you guys doing whatever it is that you do, none of this really would have worked. So I understood that. And I got a really deep, rich appreciation for the people that do it. People in that industry, in my world, they don't do that for money. You know what I mean? I saw a person that has never seen my mother before in their life give her so much love in intensive care unit within 30 minutes, more so than what I have with most other people in my life. And I sat there and I looked at this, you know, this nurse. I'm like, why? Why are you here? It's not because, what would they get? $1,000, $1,500 a week? It's not because of that. There's something deeper and rich. And it's like, hey, and she's like, I'm here to care for people. This is what I love to do. This is my calling. I just do it in a way where it's in intensive care. For you, you do it in your way. For me, I do it in my way. For some people, it's being a mum or even a dad or whatever. There's many different ways to do it, right? But what was the question? I got carried away.
Yeah, no, it's good. I get lost in your teachings. What can someone do? Like
Oh,
resources,
what can I do?
books, podcasts, just things so people can start to educate themselves, start to equip themselves with the same
Yeah.
viewpoints.
Look, I'd have to be pretty silly to not invite people to learn self-mastery techniques or pretty much anything that I've got going out there, right? For me personally, I focus on communication with the unconscious mind, and I truly believe that if you want to heal yourself, if you want to change some area of your life, if you're not communicating with the unconscious mind, I mean, it's going to be pretty tricky, right? So there's obviously, myself or my teachings, and in the real life world, I'm only just getting started. Like I've been doing this for the last 10 years, probably 12 years, right? But it's only now where I'm really just getting started. And
That's awesome.
I think the benefit of so-called my teaching or my way of doing it is it's simple and effective. I don't want to go through and read 500 pages when within those 500 pages, there's only 3 things that I really need to do. It's like, just give me the 3 things, right? So that's sort of my philosophy and that way that I teach it. But I mean, shit, if you think of, oh, I mean, how many is there, right? You could look at Dr. DeMartini. If you haven't heard of him or if you've not listened or studied from him, yeah, there you go, breakthrough experience. I mean, that book alone will change your life,
Oh
right?
man, the DeMartini method, I use it like every day. It's phenomenal.
Exactly, right? So DeMartini's a massive one. Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's huge within the healing world. That's why I really love his teachings. Another great one, I truly do believe that this is the book or this is the knowledge that, so-called save mums' lives, was Louise Hay. You know what I mean? We've talked about this many, many times. It's like my number 1 book recommendation. It is Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Own Life, or Heal Your Own Life. And within that book, she talks about a whole bunch of different things, right? Mirror work, loving yourself, blah, 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 bringing yourself back into balance. But right at the very end of that book, there's an index of symptoms that people can have from A to Z. Use your imagination. There's a whole bunch of different symptoms that you can have, right? Acne, bloody anxiety, all the way down to bloody depression. And I don't know, there's just heaps in there, right? But next to that symptom, it pinpoints the cause. And the cause is normally, I don't know, like I don't love myself, or there's negative emotion or resentment from the past, or whatever it might be, blah, blah, blah. And I remember one day it was on my shelf and I was going in to see mum and I said, hey, look, I'll bring you some books. Because when I wasn't there, remember how I said, every time I'm not here, you sort of go to shit, no offense.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, it's because I'm bored. And what I realized is that when she wasn't busy, the old way of thinking would creep back in.
Yeah.
I was like, right, I got to keep this lady busy, right? I said, I'll bring in a book for you. And she ended up reading this book, right? Heal Your Own Life. And we got right to the very end of it. And at the very end of it, there was obviously that index and we started to go through it. And we looked up the fungal. I think that's what it was, word for word, right? It's like fungal. And next to it, all it says was resentment and repressed memories from the past.
Deep shit, huh?
And I was like, Mom, what is it? Give me good. And that's when we started to dive in, all sorts of different events throughout her life. Some that she forgotten. She's like, fuck, I haven't thought about that in 40 years. And, like I said, within, I think it was about a week and a half, she was out of hospital. She then lived with my sister for 6 months. She's just lived with me for the last, probably 6 months, 7 months. She's got a job. She's just got a little 2-bedroom unit. She bought a car.
How
You
good.
know, it's crazy. It's absolutely mind-blowing. So Louise Hay definitely would
Awesome,
be,
man.
yeah, right up there.
Just to wrap this up, because I've got a 3 o'clock that we're going to jump into. Man, this has been awesome, man. I'd love to have you in again in the future, maybe in the next chapter. If you, when you, like you said, you're just getting started, man. You're just going to blossom. You're going to get more teachings, more resources, help more people, and it's just going to compound and compound. For anyone that wants to connect with you, reach out to you for your services, to say thank you, to just get involved in your world, where's the best place they can go to get you?
I mean, pretty much anywhere. If you type in self-mastery with Luke Pearce, Facebook, you can get me like personally under Luke Pearce, Instagram, under self-mastery Luke Pearce. If you want to go to the website, it's just www.selfmasterywithluke.com. And I mean, that's it. Heaps of different ways, right?
Thank you so much. This has been a podcast full of gold. And brother, I appreciate your time. Thank you for being here with me today. And for the listeners, guys, share this with one person. Share this with one person that you know would get something from this. It's been full of takeaways, full of gold. And one more time, Luke, thank you so much for being here today.
You're very welcome. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.